Attention! Lethal!
As a prequel to The Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit film series is definitely an epic masterpiece, not only immersing the audience in its stunning visual effects, but also deeply captivating with its vivid characters. Many people may have initially only watched it for the special effects, but they overlooked the exciting plot.
And
The story begins with the dwarves, who originally settled in the underground city of Moria. Due to their greed, they kept mining until they awakened Smaug. After Moria fell, the dwarves were forced to migrate to Middle-earth. They settled in Erebor, the largest dwarven kingdom in Middle-earth, near Lake Town. Under the leadership of their king, Thror, the dwarves mined relentlessly, discovering an endless supply of precious metals and gems. The dwarves' craftsmanship was unmatched, and they created exquisite jewelry and artifacts. Over time, however, the mines became too deep, and Thror's greed led him to discover the Arkenstone, the most precious gem of all. Thror became obsessed with the Arkenstone and mounted it on his throne as a symbol of Erebor's power and wealth. Everyone came to witness the Arkenstone, even the proud elven king, Thranduil, who wanted to trade his own heirloom for an equivalent treasure. However, Thror, driven by his greed, confiscated Thranduil's treasure, causing the alliance between the two races to break. The dwarves' comfortable life did not last long, as they unwittingly attracted an unwanted guest who also loved gold, the dragon Smaug. Smaug attacked the lonely mountain with his dragonfire, leaving death and destruction in his wake, including the nearby lake town. With Smaug's arrival, Erebor fell. Thror, clutching the Arkenstone, fled for his life, but the violent shaking caused him to drop the gem into the vaults. Fortunately, his grandson, Thorin, pulled him to safety just in time. Thorin and the remaining dwarves fled the city, and the Elven King and his army, who had been watching from afar, left without helping. The dwarves were left to wander and suffer. Thorin was forced to work in the human world, while Thror, filled with resentment, gathered an army to retake Moria and lay the foundation for reclaiming the lonely mountain. However, Moria had already been occupied by the orcs, and they had to face Azog, the strongest orc in Middle-earth. During the battle, Azog beheaded Thror, and Thorin witnessed everything. Thorin, undaunted, picked up his shield and sword and prepared to fight Azog. In the fight, Azog knocked Thorin's shield away and gained the upper hand. At a critical moment, Thorin picked up the oak tree from the ground and used it as a shield to block Azog's attacks. He then exploded with a burst of strength, cutting off Azog's hand. The dwarven army's morale was greatly boosted and they began to counterattack the orcs, forcing Azog to retreat back to Moria. Although they eventually won the war, they suffered heavy losses. Only 13 of the once mighty dwarven army survived. Through this battle, the young dwarven prince Thorin became famous and earned the respect and followings of his people. However, it also marked the beginning of the dwarves' decline from a once powerful race. At this point, the story of the Hobbit has only just begun. 60 years later, Gandalf, who was tasked with maintaining peace in Middle-earth, discovered that dark forces were beginning to rise. He recruited Thorin to assemble a team to fight against this power, with the ultimate goal of defeating the soon-to-awaken Smaug. Thorin eagerly accepted the mission, as he also wanted to eliminate Smaug and reclaim the lonely mountain for himself. However, the success of this adventure depended on a crucial figure, the main character of the story, Hobbit Bilbo Baggins. Because Smaug was highly sensitive to the dwarves' scent, and hobbits were naturally small in stature with wide feet, they were the perfect candidates for infiltration. Gandalf specifically traveled to Bilbo's hometown, a peaceful and idyllic place where people lived contentedly. Bilbo spent his days smoking and basking in the sun, and Gandalf tried every means to persuade him to join the team and complete the adventure. However, Bilbo was accustomed to his comfortable life and flatly refused. But that night, when Bilbo was enjoying his dinner, Gandalf summoned a large group of dwarves to his small house and unceremoniously devoured all of his food. Even the hospitable hobbit was helpless in this situation, but when he heard Gandalf talk about equal distribution of the wealth and treasures, Bilbo immediately became interested. The next morning, When the house was empty, Bilbo regretted missing out on the chance to make a fortune. He immediately caught up with the expedition team, wielding the contract as his proof of participation, and so, Bilbo embarked on an adventure with a group of dwarves. The scruffy old man took off his hat, allowing the small birds outside to quickly return to their nest on his head. He looked in astonishment at the small hedgehog lying on the ground, barely alive. He hurriedly picked it up and brought it back to his small hut. He treated the forest animals as if they were his own life, trying to feed the hedgehog with a concoction of medicinal herbs, but it did not improve. Suddenly, a huge, unknown creature crawled slowly towards his window. He realized that the forest animals must have been attacked by some kind of evil magic. He picked up a piece of wood and blocked the door, buying time for the hedgehog. When he turned around, he found that the hedgehog had died. He felt regret and quickly took out a blue gemstone artifact, placing it on the hedgehog's mouth and chanting a spell. At this point, the mice on the ground were also frightened. The gemstone successfully absorbed the black magic inside the hedgehog's body. When he saw the little hedgehog come back to life, the old man smiled with relief. The monster outside seemed to have been driven away by his incantation. It turned out that he was the brown-robed wizard Radagast. When he hurriedly went outside to check, he found that there were 2 huge spiders. This meant that the forces of darkness had begun to resurface. He wanted to find out where these spiders came from, so he asked the small birds to lead the way and drove a wooden cart pulled by rabbits through the jungle to an abandoned castle. The castle had been abandoned for thousands of years, and it was filled with a gloomy darkness everywhere. Suddenly, the hand of a nearby statue moved strangely. An undead wizard launched a sudden attack from behind him. Radagast reacted quickly, blocking the fatal blow and knocking the undead sword to the ground. He saw the shadow of the undead wizard floating in the void, and then he quickly drove the wooden cart away from the castle. He found the grey-robed wizard Gandalf and told him about what had happened, handing over the sword he had picked up from the ground. Gandalf already understood that the forces of darkness were about to resurface in Middle-earth. Suddenly, orcs' wild wolves attacked, and the few of them quickly fought back and easily killed 2 giant wolves. It seems that the orcs' army is not far from them. Sure enough, a large wave of orcs swarmed from the mountaintop. Radagast quickly drove the wooden cart to lead them away. However, in the evening, the dwarves discovered that the trolls had stolen their horses. They unanimously decided to send Bilbo to steal the horses back. Hobbits are naturally small in stature with wide feet, making them very suitable for infiltration. The trolls did not notice his presence, but the horse rope was tied too tightly and he could not untie it. At this point, he ran behind the trolls, trying to steal their knife, but instead was mistaken for a handkerchief and had his nose wiped by the trolls. The dwarves rushed out to save him, but as expected, they were no match for the trolls. They were all captured, tied up, and skewered like kebabs over a fire. In a moment of desperation, Bilbo tried to stall for time by telling the trolls they were cooking the dwarves all wrong. He suggested they should skin the dwarves and add some seasoning. His ruse worked. Gandalf appeared just in time, smashing the rock with his staff. The first rays of morning sunlight turned the trolls to stone. As it turns out, they feared the sun and only came out at night. Following the trolls' tracks, the group found a cave filled with precious treasures and 3 elven-forged swords. Gandalf, Thorin, and Bilbo each took one. The swords would emit a blue glow whenever orcs were near. Before long, the group encountered pursuing orcs who had been trailing them all along. Luckily, Gandalf found a nearby cave, and they all jumped in to escape the orcs. The elves who happened to be passing by outside joined forces to besiege the orcs. The group ventured deeper into the cave in search of an exit, and were stunned to discover a hidden, beautiful landscape at the end. They had arrived at the home of the Rivendell elves. Only the elf Elrond could decipher the map Gandalf carried, so they sought his help. That evening, Thorin presented Elrond with the map, and Elrond recognized the moonlight script that could only be read under the moon's rays. The best time to read the script was now, revealing that the door to the Lonely Mountain could only be opened under specific conditions. They had limited time to infiltrate the mountain, or they would have to wait another year. Without delay, the group set off the next day, traveling through the misty mountains and into the high peaks. In the dead of night, amidst a thunderstorm, they trekked along the perilous cliffs. Bilbo almost fell off the edge but was saved by the dwarves. Suddenly, a massive boulder hurtled towards them, shattering and raining debris upon the group. To their surprise, 2 ents were fighting each other. The The group had never expected to encounter the legendary Ents. Caught off guard, they found themselves in the crossfire as more rocks were thrown. The mountain began to crumble beneath them, and they realized they were standing on one of the Ents' feet. The mountains moved rapidly, causing everyone to lose their balance, and were thrown to the edge of another cliff. Half the group managed to jump to safety, but the rest remained on the Ents' foot. Unsure of why the Ents were fighting, the group had no choice but to cling to the edge of the cliff, hoping to find a way out of this precarious situation. Suddenly, the Ents on the other side fell with a loud crash, and the group of people who were still standing at the feet of the Ents were in great danger. They hurtled towards another mountain and were unsure of their fate. With the fall of the Ents, the battle came to an end. Thorin was anxious about the safety of his companions and hurried over to check on them. Fortunately, everyone narrowly escaped the danger. Seeing that everyone was safe, he breathed a sigh of relief. However, Bilbo almost fell off a cliff, and with the help of everyone, he was pulled up. They found a nearby cave and decided to rest there for the night and continue their journey the next day. Little did they know that the danger was far from over. The ground suddenly began to shift and the mud and sand started to spread towards them. Thorin, who was always alert, quickly woke everyone up and warned them to be on guard. Suddenly, a stone mechanism on the ground was triggered, causing everyone to fall into a narrow passage. It was obvious that they had fallen into an orc trap. A large group of orcs had been waiting for them in their lair. The dwarves were captured and tied up. In the chaos, Bilbo was ignored, possibly because he didn't smell like a dwarf. No one paid any attention to him. Bilbo was puzzled and picked up his sword, preparing to sneak in and assess the situation. Suddenly, an orc jumped out at him, and they struggled and fell off the cliff. Their fates unknown, the other dwarves were taken to Goblin Town, which was connected by wooden bridges. All the orcs were extremely excited, and the dwarves were brought before Bolg for trial. Bolg was dancing and singing his own original song while the dwarves were presented before him. The dwarves complained that the song was terrible and ruined Bolg's mood. He ordered his men to disarm the dwarves, but just as he was about to take action, a white light suddenly struck, knocking down countless orcs. In a critical moment, the grey-robed wizard Gandalf appeared and rescued them.
Take up arms. Fight! Fight!
At Gandalf's command, everyone picked up their weapons and began to counterattack. Thorin blocked Bolg's fatal blow in the fight, causing Bolg to lose his footing and fall off the cliff. The dwarves grabbed ladders and rushed towards the orcs. They used the bridges to block the orcs' attack and crossed to the other side with the help of a hanging bridge. Gandalf used his staff to smash a giant rock, and the group followed behind it. Everywhere was a complex network of wooden bridges, and they had no idea where the exit was. They could only run to avoid the pursuing orcs. Suddenly, Bolg leaped from the cliff and blocked their path. The orcs behind him swarmed forward, cutting off their retreat. Originally, everyone thought that Bolg was a formidable character, but they didn't expect Gandalf to kill him directly. As the wooden bridges could not bear the weight, they collapsed in an instant, and everyone fell off the cliff. The bottomless cave frightened everyone, but luckily, the rocks slowed their descent, and they narrowly escaped. Gandalf ordered everyone to find an exit as quickly as possible, as they could only shake off the orcs in the sunlight. Bilbo fell to the bottom of the cave as soon as he entered, but fortunately, he was not seriously injured. However, a new danger was creeping up on him. A skinny monster slowly crawled towards him. Isn't this the familiar Gollum from the Lord of the Rings that everyone knows? He had survived by eating the orcs that fell down here. Gollum dragged the fallen orcs away and prepared to have a feast. Suddenly, the orcs woke up from unconsciousness, and just as both sides were fiercely fighting, a shiny ring fell out of Gollum's pocket. Bilbo picked it up, and this was how he became associated with the One Ring, which led to the story of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He took out his elvish sword and observed Gollum from behind a rock. As the orcs died, the blue light emitted from Bilbo's sword disappeared. At this time, Gollum had disappeared and was quietly rowing towards him. When Bilbo looked up, Gollum suddenly appeared above him, having eaten orcs for most of his life. Gollum wanted a change of taste, but Bilbo's elvish sword made him hesitant to approach. During their conversation, Bilbo found out that Gollum was originally a hobbit. However, after obtaining the One Ring, he became insane and his physical appearance deteriorated. But he remained intelligent. He proposed to play a riddle game with Bilbo, promising to lead him out of the caves if he won, or eat him if he lost. The game started with Bilbo asking the first riddle. "What is 1 + 1? Gollum thought for a moment and quickly answered, resulting in the score being tied at 2-2. When it was Bilbo's turn again, he became nervous. He absent-mindedly touched his pocket and had an inspiration. He challenged Gollum to guess what was in his pocket. Gollum couldn't solve it, and Bilbo won the game. However, Gollum didn't want to face the fact that he lost and tried to approach Bilbo slowly. When he touched his pocket, he realized that the ring was missing and frantically searched for it. Bilbo quickly took the ring out of his pocket and hid it behind his back. When Gollum realized what happened, he chased after Bilbo. Bilbo accidentally stumbled upon the exit and his companions, but Gollum blocked his way. Bilbo considered killing him with his sword, but he pitied Gollum and spared him. He jumped over Gollum and caught up with his companions. The dwarves escaped from the caves, but Thorin accused Bilbo of abandoning the group. Bilbo overheard his complaints and was angry, so he decisively took off the ring and appeared in front of everyone. Everyone looked at him in disbelief, unable to imagine how a seemingly powerless hobbit could escape from the caves. Gandalf looked at him sharply, as if he had discovered a little secret hidden in his pocket, but he didn't expose Bilbo directly. However, as soon as they escaped, they encountered the pursuit of orcs led by Azog. The group was forced to flee once again. The orcs quickly caught up, and the group was pushed to the edge of a cliff with no way out. Gandalf quickly ordered the dwarves to climb trees to hide. A large group of direwolves arrived and started prowling around, waiting for an opportunity. Gandalf quickly thought of a plan to seek help. He picked up a nearby butterfly, chanted a spell, and sent it to seek help. Meanwhile, Azog, the leader of the orcs, arrived on the scene. He was the archenemy of Thorin, the dwarf prince. Azog had killed Thorin's grandfather in front of him, creating an unbreakable grudge. Azog smelled Thorin's scent and taunted him, while the direwolves continued to gnaw at the tree branches. The trees were unable to bear the weight and started tilting downwards, eventually falling down. The group was forced to climb to the last tree, and the situation was becoming increasingly dire, as they were about to be completely defeated. Azog revealed an evil smile. In moments of crisis, Gandalf always came up with a solution. He picked up a pine cone, ignited it with his staff, and threw it into the pack of direwolves. The wolves, afraid of fire, quickly retreated. Indeed, the plan worked very well. Gandalf once again ignited more pine cones and had the dwarves throw them, and in an instant, the forest was ablaze. Just as everyone was cheering, suddenly the tree roots could no longer bear the weight and began to collapse. The situation was extremely dangerous, and the dwarves were nearly killed. Thorin looked at Azog's fierce expression, and his anger surged up within him. He took his sword and charged at Azog, roaring with fury. This played right into Azog's hands, and his direwolf knocked Thorin down. Thorin refused to give up and stood up again, but Azog didn't give him a chance to counterattack. He viciously struck Thorin in the face with his hammer, and the direwolf bit him and flung him into the air. Just as Azog's lieutenant was about to take Thorin's head, Bilbo picked up his sword and made a daring leap to save Thorin. Bilbo, who had no fighting experience, unexpectedly exhibited remarkable potential, but this also made him a target, successfully drawing Azog's attention. At this critical moment, the dwarves rushed forward to support, and the two sides engaged in a stalemate. But they were still no match for the orcs. Just then, Gandalf's reinforcements arrived. Dozens of giant eagles flew in and grabbed the orcs. They used their wings to fan the flames and attack the orcs. The orcs had no chance to fight back. Another giant eagle gently picked up the unconscious Thorin and rescued him, and the others were also saved by the giant eagles and left the forest. Finally, Gandalf jumped down from the tree and was successfully caught by a giant eagle. Azog roared in anger, only able to watch them escape with resentment in his eyes. These giant eagles lived year-round on the highest peak of the Misty Mountains. Everyone was placed on the highest boulder together, and Thorin was still unconscious. Gandalf chanted a spell to wake him up, and the first thing Thorin did when he woke up was to find Bilbo and give him a scolding, thinking that his recent reckless behavior was too foolish. Then he gave him a big hug. Thorin said that this was the biggest mistake he had ever made in his life and apologized for his contemptuous behavior towards Bilbo. Afterwards, everyone looked at the distant sunset and finally saw the silhouette of the Lonely Mountain. In the sunset, the Lonely Mountain looked very magnificent. It was the last palace of the dwarves in Middle-earth. This adventure was very difficult, but they were finally close to their destination. A small bird flew towards the lonely mountain, which was a good omen. As the small bird knocked on the snail shell at the foot of the lonely mountain, the sound echoed through the walls and into the great hall. The magnificent palace was filled with countless treasures of gold and silver, and a giant eye suddenly opened. Smaug was about to wake up,